In the wake of Alexander the Great's untimely death, the world stood on the brink of transformation. His empire, the largest the ancient world had ever known, stretched from the mountains of Macedonia to the sands of Egypt and the fertile valleys of the Indus. Yet, its foundation rested on a single man's ambition, vision, and charisma. With his passing in 323 BCE, this once unified realm fractured like a shattered mirror, each piece reflecting the greed, ambition, and desperation of those who sought to claim his legacy. The wars of the Diadochi were not just struggles for territory but brutal contests of loyalty and betrayal, pitting comrades against one another in a deadly game of power. Generals who had once marched alongside Alexander now turned on each other, their battle cries echoing across Greece, Egypt, Persia, and beyond. This is a tale of ambition unchecked, of alliances forged and broken, and of blood-stained battlefields that would shape the course of history. The dream of a united empire would crumble under the weight of human greed. Yet from its ashes, the Hellenistic world would rise, a cultural and intellectual legacy that would echo through the ages. Prepare to journey into the chaos of the Diadochi Wars, where the fate of nations and the ambitions of men collided, creating a world forever changed. The shattered dream of Alexander's empire. Alexander the Great's empire, a sprawling tapestry of cultures and territories stretching from Greece to the edges of India, seemed destined to reshape history forever. Yet, the moment of his untimely death in 323 BCE set into motion a cascade of ambition, betrayal, and bloodshed that tore apart this monumental legacy. The wars of the Diadochi were not just battles for land. They were clashes of egos, ideologies, and desperate attempts to claim the mantle of Alexander himself. Setting the stage, a kingdom without a king. When Alexander died, he left behind an empire without a clear heir. The immediate aftermath was chaos. The Council of Babylon, hastily convened by Perdiccas, tried to stabilize the crumbling unity. However, unity was not in the vocabulary of Alexander's generals, the Diadochi. Each of these men, Seleucus, Ptolemy, Antipater, and others, had marched with Alexander, but their loyalty lay more with personal ambition than the dream of a united empire. The meeting in Babylon became a theater of arguments and suspicion. Perdiccas attempted to position himself as regent, while others pushed for a figurehead ruler in the form of Arrhidaeus, Alexander's half-brother, or the unborn child of Alexander and Roxana. Despite these debates, the council's decisions were little more than fuel for the fires of war, the seeds of discord. At its heart, the Macedonian monarchy was built on military hierarchy and personal loyalty. These values, once Alexander's strength, became its undoing. The Diadochi, now ruling over diverse lands with their own traditions, faced the challenge of asserting control. They mimicked Alexander's style of leadership for legitimacy, but this facade quickly gave way to their own agendas. For example, Ptolemy, stationed in Egypt, began consolidating his rule independently. Meanwhile, in the eastern territories, rulers like Eumenes struggled to maintain alliances amidst the growing hostility of their peers. The division of Alexander's empire was not merely geographical but also ideological. Some generals sought to continue his vision of cultural fusion, while others clung to xenophobic ideals that rejected non-Macedonian influences. The Council of Babylon, precursor to war. One of the most contentious moments came during the Council of Babylon. Perdiccas, recognizing the fragile unity, proposed a co-regency between Arrhidaeus and Alexander's unborn son. Yet, this compromise failed to satisfy anyone. Meleager, a prominent general, accused Perdiccas of plotting to crown himself king. The resulting stalemate escalated into open conflict, culminating in Meleager's assassination. This betrayal marked the beginning of the Diadochi's descent into a cycle of revenge. Soldiers and generals alike began aligning themselves into factions, setting the stage for the wars that would consume the empire. The Lamian War, a Greek revolt. While the Diadochi quarreled, discontent simmered in southern Greece. Athens, chafing under Macedonian rule, saw an opportunity to reclaim its autonomy. Led by the charismatic Leosthenes, the Greeks launched the Lamian War against Antipater's forces. The Athenians, bolstered by mercenaries, initially found success, even besieging Antipater in the city of Lamia. Yet, this victory was fleeting. Antipater regrouped, leveraging Macedonian reinforcements to counter the Greek forces. The siege of Lamia ended with Leosthenes' death, a pivotal loss for the Greek cause. The subsequent Battle of Cranon crushed any hopes of a Greek resurgence, firmly re-establishing Macedonian dominance over the region. A precarious balance. The first years after Alexander's death highlight the fragile nature of his empire. Without his unifying presence, the cracks between Macedonian and local traditions widened. Moreover, the ambition of his generals, while initially tempered by their shared loyalty to Alexander, soon became a destructive force. Historically, this period underscores the challenge of succession in empires built around a single charismatic leader. The Macedonian approach to kingship, heavily reliant on personal bonds, proved ill-suited for governing such a vast and diverse territory. The First War of the Diadochi, betrayal and battle. The aftermath of Alexander's death became a whirlwind of alliances and enmities, culminating in the First War of the Diadochi. This conflict, spanning from 322 BCE to 321 BCE, was not just a battle for territories but also a contest of cunning, strategy, and raw power. The protagonists, Perdiccas, Antipater, Antigonos, and Ptolemy, transformed from comrades in arms to bitter rivals, and their actions would shape the future of the fractured empire. The stealing of Alexander's corpse. One of the defining sparks of the First War of the Diadochi was a shocking act of defiance. After Alexander's death, his body was to be transported to Macedon for burial, symbolizing unity. However, Ptolemy, stationed in Egypt, intercepted the funeral procession and brought the body to Alexandria instead. This act was more than mere theft, it was a declaration. By housing Alexander's remains, Ptolemy sought to solidify Egypt as the spiritual and political successor of Alexander's legacy. The theft enraged Perdiccas, who saw it as an insult to his authority as regent. This single act set a precedent for the battles to come. No longer were the Diadochi merely preserving Alexander's empire, they were carving it up for themselves. Perdiccas versus Ptolemy, the camel's rampart. Determined to punish Ptolemy for his audacity, Perdiccas mobilized his forces and marched toward Egypt. However, Ptolemy, a master strategist, anticipated this move and fortified his borders. The two forces clashed near the Nile River, at a site known as the Camel's Rampart. Perdiccas, hoping for a swift victory, employed war elephants and the elite silver shields to storm Ptolemy's defenses. Yet, Ptolemy's forces held their ground, using superior knowledge of the terrain and disciplined tactics to repel the invaders. Perdiccas' campaign turned disastrous when he attempted to cross the Nile. His troops, hindered by the river's strong currents and treacherous sandbanks, suffered heavy losses. This failure sowed dissent within his ranks, and his closest allies, Seleucus, Python, and Antigenes, turned against him. In a dramatic twist, these generals entered Perdiccas' tent and assassinated him, effectively ending his campaign. Ptolemy's rise. Ptolemy emerged victorious, securing Egypt as his stronghold. Unlike his rivals, he pursued a pragmatic strategy, focusing on stabilizing his territories rather than overextending himself. This approach allowed him to establish a lasting dynasty that would endure for centuries. Ptolemy also understood the importance of cultural integration. By blending Greek and Egyptian traditions, he created a unique Hellenistic identity for his realm. This policy not only secured the loyalty of his subjects but also set Egypt apart from the other Diadochi kingdoms. The chaos in Asia Minor. While Egypt stabilized under Ptolemy, Asia Minor descended into chaos. Antigonos, a seasoned general, aligned himself with Antipater and Crateros to confront Eumenes, one of Perdiccas' remaining allies. Eumenes, stationed in Cappadocia, faced the daunting task of defending his position against overwhelming odds. The Battle of the Hellespont became a pivotal moment in this conflict. Eumenes, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, resorted to clever deception to rally his troops. He convinced them they were fighting a lesser general, Neoptolemus, rather than the formidable Crateros. This ruse motivated his soldiers to fight fiercely, leading to a surprising victory. Crateros, a revered figure among the Macedonian troops, fell in battle, dealing a significant blow to the Antiperdiccas coalition. However, Eumenes' triumph was short-lived. Antigonos regrouped, forcing Eumenes to retreat to the fortress of Nora, where he endured a prolonged siege. The partition of Triperidissos.
Vit perdikos dead.
The remaining Diadochi convened in Triperidissos to reorganize the empire. This meeting, held in 321 BCE, was another exercise in betrayal and political maneuvering. Antipater emerged as the new regent, but his authority was challenged by younger generals like Seleucus and Antigonos. The empire was divided anew. Antigonos received Asia Minor. Seleucus took Babylon. Ptolemy retained Egypt. Other generals secured smaller satrapies. Notably absent from this division was Eumenes, who was declared an outlaw. Antigonos was tasked with hunting him down, further escalating tensions in Asia Minor. The fragility of unity. The First War of the Diadochi underscored the fragility of alliances among Alexander's successors. Personal ambition consistently trumped collective goals, leading to a cycle of wars that fragmented the empire further. Historically, this period highlights the limitations of empires built on conquest rather than governance. Without a robust administrative framework, Alexander's empire relied heavily on the loyalty of its generals, a loyalty that crumbled in his absence. The Second War of the Diadochi, shifting alliances and ruthless ambitions. With the conclusion of the First War of the Diadochi, Alexander's empire had been carved into territories ruled by ambitious generals. Yet, the uneasy peace that followed was nothing more than a temporary truce. The Second War of the Diadochi erupted in 318 BCE, driven by lingering rivalries, unresolved ambitions, and the desperate struggle for supremacy. This phase of the wars would feature a deadly combination of shifting alliances, political intrigue, and brutal battles. The death of Antipater and the rise of Polyperchon. The fragile balance established after the partition of Triperidissos was shattered by the death of Antipater in 319 BCE. As regent of the empire, Antipater had managed to maintain a semblance of stability, but his decision to appoint Polyperchon as his successor instead of his son Cassander ignited a fierce power struggle. Cassander, enraged by his father's decision, fled to Antigonos in Asia Minor, seeking an ally to challenge Polyperchon's authority. Polyperchon, meanwhile, sought to solidify his position by aligning himself with Eumenes, who had been besieged by Antigonos in the fortress of Nora. He also issued a proclamation to the Greek city-states, promising them autonomy in exchange for their support. This strategic move turned the polis against Cassander, who was perceived as a continuation of Macedonian domination. However, it also set the stage for one of the bloodiest confrontations of the Diadochi Wars. Olympius' return and the fall of Eurydice. Polyperchon's rise to power saw him gain the support of Olympius, Alexander's mother, who had long harbored resentment against Antipater and his allies. Olympius, along with Alexander IV and Roxana, returned to Epirus and rallied support among her family and allies. Olympius's return to Macedonia was nothing short of dramatic. She launched a campaign against Philip III Aridaeus, Alexander's half-brother, and his wife Eurydice, who were aligned with Cassander. After capturing them in Amphipolis, Olympius executed Aridaeus and offered Eurydice a grim choice: to commit suicide by hanging or poison. Eurydice, defiant even in death, chose to hang herself with her own belt. These events solidified Olympius's position as a force to be reckoned with, but also fueled Cassander's determination to reclaim Macedonia. The siege of Megalopolis and Cassander's retaliation. Polyperchon's attempt to assert control over southern Greece culminated in the siege of Megalopolis. This city, loyal to Cassander, resisted Polyperchon's forces despite being heavily outnumbered. The defenders, led by the skilled General Damis, managed to repel multiple assaults, including a massive elephant charge that ended in disaster for Polyperchon's army. This failure marked a turning point in the war. Cassander, bolstered by his growing support among the Greek police, launched a counteroffensive that pushed Polyperchon back into Epirus. Cassander's forces besieged Olympias in Pydna, capturing her and eventually having her executed by the families of those she had wronged. With Olympias dead, Cassander took control of Macedonia, imprisoning Alexander IV and Roxana in Amphipolis. Their eventual fate would serve as a grim reminder of the ruthless nature of the Diadochi Wars. Eumenes and the Eastern Front. While the West descended into chaos, the Eastern Front saw a dramatic showdown between Eumenes and Antigonos. After escaping the siege of Nora, Eumenes rallied support from the eastern satraps, including Peucestas of Persis and the commanders of the elite Silver Shields. The two armies met at the Battle of Paraketine, a brutal clash in which both sides suffered heavy losses. Eumenes' forces, though outnumbered, used superior tactics to achieve a tactical victory. However, Antigonos's relentless pursuit forced Eumenes to retreat to Gabiene, where the final act of his campaign would unfold. At Gabiene, Antigonos resorted to psychological warfare. His forces captured Eumenes' baggage train, which included the families of the Silver Shields. Betrayed by their own troops, Eumenes was handed over to Antigonos, who, despite his respect for the general, ultimately ordered his execution. Eumenes' death marked the end of organized resistance in the east and solidified Antigonos' dominance over Asia. The ruthlessness of power. The Second War of the Diadochi exposed the lengths to which the successors would go to secure their ambitions. Loyalties shifted as frequently as battle lines, and no one was safe from betrayal, not even those who had once been trusted allies. This period also highlighted the increasing fragmentation of the empire. While the wars began as a struggle to control Alexander's legacy, they evolved into a contest for personal power. The ideals of unity and cultural integration that Alexander had championed were overshadowed by the cold pragmatism of his generals. The Third War of the Diadochi, a battle for supremacy. The Third War of the Diadochi, 315 to 311 BCE, stands as one of the most pivotal chapters in the unraveling of Alexander's empire. With the remnants of his vast conquests now divided among the Diadochi, this war was less about preserving his legacy and more about asserting individual dominance. The ambitions of Antigonos, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus would turn the Hellenistic world into a battlefield, as each general sought to carve out an empire of their own. The rise of Antigonos. By the end of the Second War of the Diadochi, Antigonos had established himself as the most powerful of Alexander's successors. With control over Asia Minor and Persia, he commanded vast resources and a formidable army. However, his growing power alarmed the other Diadochi, who feared that Antigonos sought to reunite Alexander's empire under his rule. Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachos formed a coalition to oppose him. Their combined resources and strategic positions presented a significant threat to Antigonos, but he was determined to maintain his dominance. Antigonos' campaigns in the east. Antigonos began his campaign by targeting Seleucus, who had recently reclaimed Babylon with the support of Ptolemy. Determined to eliminate this threat, Antigonos marched eastward, amassing a massive army to confront Seleucus. However, Seleucus, a master of guerrilla warfare, used his knowledge of the terrain to avoid direct confrontation, instead harassing Antigonos' supply lines and striking at vulnerable points. The conflict in the east culminated in a series of skirmishes that drained Antigonos' resources and forced him to retreat. This allowed Seleucus to consolidate his control over the eastern territories, establishing the foundation for what would later become the Seleucid Empire. The Siege of Tyre and the naval arms race. Meanwhile, in the west, Ptolemy focused on securing the Levant and the Aegean Sea. The Siege of Tyre became a symbol of his determination. Antigonos, recognizing the importance of naval supremacy, ordered the construction of a massive fleet, using the shipyards of Phoenicia to rival Ptolemy's navy. The resulting naval arms race saw both sides vying for control of key maritime routes. Ptolemy's fleet initially dominated, allowing him to launch raids along the coast of Asia Minor. However, Antigonos's new fleet eventually gained the upper hand, forcing Ptolemy to adopt a defensive strategy. Cassander's struggles in Greece. While Antigonos and Ptolemy clashed at sea, Cassander faced challenges in Greece. His attempts to solidify control over the Greek city-states were met with resistance, fueled by Polyperchon's earlier proclamation of autonomy. In response, Cassander resorted to brutal measures, including the suppression of revolts and the installation of oligarchic regimes loyal to his cause. Despite these efforts, unrest continued to simmer, weakening Cassander's position. His failure to secure widespread support in Greece left him vulnerable to the growing influence of his rivals. The Battle of Gaza. One of the most dramatic confrontations of the Third War occurred at Gaza in 312 BCE. Demetrios, the son of Antigonos, faced off against the combined forces of Ptolemy and Seleucus. The battle was a testament to the strategic brilliance of Ptolemy and Seleucus. Despite being outnumbered, they used their superior tactics to outmaneuver Demetrios's forces. The Antigonid elephants, once a symbol of their dominance, were neutralized by spikes and javelins, causing chaos in their ranks. Demetrios suffered a humiliating defeat, losing thousands of troops and the loyalty of many allies. However, he managed to escape and regroup, setting the stage for future confrontations. The aftermath and the Treaty of 311 BCE. By 311 BCE, the prolonged war had exhausted all sides. Antigonos, despite his setbacks, remained a formidable force, while Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Cassander had managed to secure their respective territories. Realizing that a decisive victory was unlikely, the Diadochi agreed to a temporary peace treaty. The Treaty of 311 BCE recognized the territorial divisions among the Diadochi. Antigonos retained control of Asia Minor and the eastern satrapies. Seleucus was acknowledged as the ruler of Babylon and the eastern provinces. Ptolemy secured Egypt and parts of the Levant. Cassander was affirmed as the regent of Macedonia. However, this peace was fragile. The ambitions of the Diadochi remained unfulfilled, and their rivalry continued to fester, laying the groundwork for future wars. The waning legacy of Alexander. The Third War of the Diadochi marked a turning point in the dissolution of Alexander's empire. While the war highlighted the strategic brilliance of the successors, it also underscored their inability to cooperate for a common cause. The ideals of unity and cultural integration that Alexander had championed were increasingly replaced by territorial ambitions and personal rivalries. The wars of the Diadochi transformed the Hellenistic world into a fragmented mosaic of kingdoms, each vying for dominance. As the Third War of the Diadochi drew to a close, the successors had carved out their own realms, but the struggle for supremacy was far from over. Antigonos, still dreaming of a united empire, would face new challenges from the coalition of Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachos,